I got you guys.
Gene, can you give us a sound check?
I was gonna say.
Yep, I hear you guys.
Thank you.
You took your own little cruise to Hawaii. Okay. That's crazy.
Oh, no, it's just me and then, but I'm not connected.
If your mic is speaking wrong.
And it looks like just Gene Paul that's promoted.
Be worried about and vice versa.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock, March 4th, 2025, here at the Mill. And this is a Lake Stevens City Council workshop meeting. The meeting is being recorded and it's live, and it's also being recorded, will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later. So with that, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And we'll jump right into the discussion items. First one on the list is the Mill 2024 report. So I'll throw it to Sarah.
Awesome. Good evening, Council. Sarah Garceau, Parks and Recreation Director. I am asking for permission to share my screen. Thank you very much. All right, so the Parks and Recreation Department has put together a 2024 report for the Mill. In your staff report, you will see a summary of all of the numbers that we'll be going over here in this report. I wanted to start off first by noting all limitations and kind of setting up the parameter for how I am talking about the numbers as we move forward. This whole analysis is set up assuming a 70% availability for public rentals in this building. while 30% of the time is reserved for city-only business. So you'll see that in some of the numbers as we talk about expenses. The Sawyer's Room specifically is only for city business Monday through Thursday. City business can also be requested by staff when it's official meetings for the city or public meetings. For instance, when council occurs, we also are blocking Hartford Hall as well as the Stack to make sure that we don't have conflicting noise. So that's how we came up with that 70% split. Staff cost assumptions, our recreation staff time is based on the average time spent with each customer, which is each reservation. We don't actually track their specific time. Facility staff time is allocated based on their scheduled time to be at this facility. And I also wanted to note that expenses do not include any staff costs for after hours needs. So for instance, if the alarm doesn't arm in this building at 10 o'clock due to an open door, Public Works has a call out from the alarm company to come down and take care of that. And call outs are 3 hours for our minimum time. So things like that aren't reflected in this current report. Revenue assumptions, it does not include cancellation fees at this time. Next year it can have those numbers added in. The books just weren't quite set up to easily glean that information this year. It is a minimal amount, I will say. So getting to the bulk of the report, this spreadsheet shows the number of rental by room. The total number of rentals for the entire building was 159. These are public rentals. This does not count the time that the city uses it. So it doesn't include the numbers of the days that Parks and Rec rents it for the harvest market or for any of our other farmers markets or those types of events. You also see the revenue to the side, as well as an in-kind donation and nonprofit discount line so that you can see what revenue would be potential but is waived. As a whole, this building brings in a total of $82,164 for the 2024 year. In the department end report, you'll see the mill numbers were a little bit higher, and that's because in analyzing the numbers, I did see the outdoor plaza was counted as part of the mill, as opposed to our shelter and other outdoor facility rentals. Next year, we'll go ahead and classify it with the outdoor ones as it has different parameters as the inside of this building. Breaking down total expenses and staff costs are here in this report, as well as the revenue. The expenses column that you see for communications, operations, repair, maintenance, utilities, that's for the entire building. These costs were down from last year. To allocate it for the public side of the rental, we went ahead and took 70% of that cost, which is $23,300. For staff costs, the allocation for the facility maintenance techs is $68,000. And the Parks and Recreation staff is at $22,700 for a total staff cost of $90,794. This is again for the public side of the rentals. Total revenue is $82,000. So you can see on the financial overview that although we bring in $82,000 and hard expenses are $23,000, where we have a net of a positive $58,000, after we take out these staff expenses, we did operate in the negative of $32,000 this year. The number was lower than this last year. I think it was closer between 60 and 70,000 from my memory. Looking at the loss of 32,000, I also wanted to talk about changes going into next year. If you'll remember back in November, we did come forward with a fee increase for the building where we made some adjustments. We also, as a staff, are analyzing all of the usage, not only by room type, but days, to see where are our weaknesses and how can we come up with a marketing strategy to help increase the number of rentals in this building. We also had a policy change take place last year around about October, November, where individual rooms can only be booked now 4 months in advance. The reason we did this was to help out with full facility rentals. Once you reserve a single room, if that happened a year in advance, you could no longer do a full facility rental. And the building is meant to be reserved as one as much as possible. So that is why when we brought forward policies for approval, that was reviewed and approved for 4 months in advance. This can always be reviewed again in the future if desired. For the expenses side, we have some reductions that we're projecting. One is the policy change. All fees are now paid up front. This helps so that our staff isn't following up time and time again with customers on reminders to pay. We had several examples where reservations were canceled due to non-action, and then the customer would call not happy, wanting to reinstate it. So this will reduce a large amount of that staff time. We also are moving towards more group tours and open houses. So every other month, we do have an open house on this building where anybody can come, walk around, ask questions. We started that just a few months ago. And we're also moving towards group tours. So what that means, if you call and set up a meeting to come schedule a walkthrough of the building at Monday at 3:00, we may have other people in on that tour as well. Used to, we'd schedule you at 3:00 and then the next person at 3:30. So we're trying to make this a little more efficient. We've also worked on automating a lot of the process through using our database system. We only just migrated this building over to our recreational database, Civic Rec, last January. So it is a relatively new process for our department. And then we're also going to be evaluating the facility maintenance tech cleaning schedule. And when I say we, that does fall under the Public Works Department. But yes, I did speak to Aaron, our Director Halverson, about this report prior to publishing it. Projected expense increases, staff costs do go up. We have cost of living adjustments every year. So that is something that we'll have to bring into the expenses next year as we analyze things. And we also know utility charges do increase. So those are just projected for next year. That is my short report. I'm happy to take any questions or dive into anything deeper if you'd like.
Thank you. Any questions?
So if we had the 2025 fee schedule applied to the 2024 rental schedule, what would the deficit be?
She's
Just
smiling.
in case you asked that question, I did prepare this slide here at the end. First, you'll see the overlay on your screen of the old versus the new prices that were approved. And then in the bottom corner, you'll see that if I took all of the same reservations times and just simply applied the new costs, it would be an increase of around 20,700. This still doesn't have us in the negative of about 11,000 for that year, but that's why we're identifying other efficiencies such as reducing staff time.
One other question, I didn't see on there, what percentage of the possible mill rentals are we at as far as like, apartment rentals, say they're at 90% of where there's a question, where are we at in terms of the maximum capacity of rentals for this facility?
That's a great question. I don't have an exact occupancy rate, and it's further complicated by how the rooms cancel each other out. So for instance, right now, when you rent Hartford Hall, it doesn't allow reservations in the stack because of the noise conflict. And so things like that would have to be taken into consideration. I haven't created an exact occupancy rate for that. It is part of the analysis that we're moving forward now that we have this data available.
Excellent.
What we do have is the number of times the rooms are reserved. I do have more detail if you'd like me to email it out, which breaks down each of these Hartford Halls on Saturdays for 2-hour blocks or the full mill rental. So I do have that additional data if you want me to send that along. It's just not in the form of percentages.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sarah, I just have a point of curiosity. Does the farmer's market, there's been a little debate, I think, in the last few months, whether it's going forward. I think it's going forward now. But
It is
there was
planned.
kind of question mark a couple months ago. Do they pay rent for any of the area that they utilize?
They have an agreement with the city that was as a result of a RFP, so a request for proposal. So they have a direct contract with the city. They don't pay rent in the form of cash. However, I do a break-even analysis each year on the farmer's market, and I can say that we were operating in the positive last year's with farmer's market, and I can certainly bring that detailed report if you'd like.
Okay. I was just curious as to what, if for some reason that kind of went away, if it would it open up more availability for rentals, or would it, how would it impact the overall income structure, I guess?
Yeah. One of the things about Wednesdays is because we have the Sawyer's room blocked off, you can't do full facility rentals.
Right.
It really only means you could rent Hartford or the Stack. And we're seeing that a lot of businesses or company retreats really want a full day
Okay.
thing.
Just commentary. I hope the farmer market continues. I just curious as to how that interacts with the entire system here. So
Absolutely.
Thank
And they will for this year.
I guess that leads to a question I had. As I'm looking at the numbers, it looks like the full facility rental was at 23. Sawyer's room and the Stack were at 52 and 63. And the goal is to have more full facility rentals. What typically is it, retreats for businesses? Who typically would rent the entire building?
We see a mix of full facility rentals for weddings, family reunions, public events, as well as private events who just don't want other people around. We have also seen company parties and retreats take place.
And how far in advance if they rent the full facility? I know you're saying individual rooms only 4 months, which is kind of short if you're planning an event. That's a pretty small window of time. So what about if they're renting the whole mill? What is the time frame there as far as
You
how
can
can they book it out a year in advance? What?
2 years in advance
2 years.
for full facility. A lot of what we see with the individual room rentals are baby showers, birthday parties. Typically a 4 to 6 hour rental time. In the past, we had allowed 2 hour rental times, but a lot of people have a hard time setting up, having an event and breaking down. So we have moved our minimum to 4 hours for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So with the someday plan of moving all of the city events up to the new municipal center, municipal campus, whatever we're calling it these days, have you run any numbers as far as what that increased flexibility and scheduling would allow for in terms of, X number of events that we could book that we can't book now?
Apologies, I'm just grabbing my power cord.
No worries.
We have not done future analysis for revenue projection or rental increases.
Okay.
It is something that we can work on, but being likely 2 years out at this point, we haven't dove into that.
Okay. And I definitely don't want to create extra work. I guess I'm just more thinking, if we're slightly under or at break even, but we know it's only, or we suspect it's only going to be for a couple of years until we can open up the schedule, then I'm less concerned about operating at a loss, even a small one. Whereas, if this is going to be the way it is for the next 5 or 10 years, then that's something I'd look closer at.
Yeah.
So.
Our goal this year is to operate at cost.
At cost. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Sarah? No? Okay. Then I will move us along also to Sarah for the city alcohol policy revision.
Thank you, Council. And I'm introducing Tanya Woolridge, who is our recreation specialist, who will take over this conversation. Requesting to.
Hello, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present a request to you. We are looking for consensus from the council to allow us to go ahead and change our current alcohol at events policy that we have. Currently, we allow beer and wine under 15% APV in the mill and in our outdoor spaces. We have requirements for public events that include substantial food items, water availability, and servers to help prevent inebriation, as well as restrictions on beer gardens when they are in the parks. We require all compliance with the Washington state and cannabis laws that are in effect. All of the alcohol permits that come through there do go through the mayor or his designee to approve. And we are utilizing our WCIA best practices when we wrote the policy. And the policy was attached to the report for review. Currently, our changes that we're specifically asking for is to remove the 15% restriction indoors only. So that would be the mill at this point in time. We would also like to rephrase it so that it's events inside city buildings for recreational use. This forward thinks about when we may add other spaces to the rec programs and be able to not have to revisit the policy again just to add another space. We would call them rec focused. That would also eliminate the city hall component because its business is city business, not recreation and rental. We would also ask to mitigate our risk that any event that is serving the higher alcohol spirits classification would have to provide substantial food service at their events, and they would have to have masked 13 servers, which are the 21-year-old and up servers that have gone under the mandatory alcohol training, which is roughly $20 and is good for 5 years. The benefits of allowing us to make this change. This came from a citizen request for an event that is looking to use the mill, and they would like it. It brings us in line with other premier event spaces, so makes us a little more competitive in that market. It allows for the recreation building expansion, as I said earlier. These changes are supported by WCIA recommendation, especially regarding the servers and our Liquor and Cannabis Board regulations. It would not cost us anything to do this. It actually could bring in more revenue as we entice more people to rent the mill. And it is supported by the city departments. We called a meeting of several departments and asked them how it would affect police, planning, risks, especially to make sure that we were all looking out for the best interests of our community and our buildings. Any question? I rushed through that one.
Could you clarify one thing?
Yeah.
I think you mentioned this policy change was just for the mill, right? Is
For
that? what you
any
said?
indoor spaces, we would like to instead, right now, the policy lists specifically the mill, and we would like to say it for rentals and recreation spaces.
What are the facilities would those be?
Future.
Future,
Oh,
if we had a community center built, if
Okay.
we had another building brought online, looking at expansion, nothing at this.
okay. Well, it's,
It can also include other city-owned buildings, such as the senior center who rents out their location as well, since we own the location.
okay. I'm reading this as other city-owned recreational facilities. So I kind of thought, you'd be maybe applying this to the picnic shelters and things of that sort, but
Indoor only. We
Indoor,
have to have
okay.
lights.
thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Did you speak with the senior center?
We have not.
Okay, I can say they would support this. I go to their board meetings. That's the one thing they've discussed because they do so many functions and they're limited to beer and wine. And there's been a few times when it's been suggested by some of their board members to, have another alternative. And their president has always said, no, we can't in a city building. So I was just wondering if you had reached out and if they confirmed that.
No, we hadn't gone that far yet, so it's good to know. Thank you.
Yes.
Go
ahead.
What's the thought process about limiting to indoor spaces? Because I've been here where they've had markers on outside for people drinking alcohol. I don't know what it's for, but they have the markers outside to differentiate public and private space. So what's the thought on the indoor alcohol? I mean, if you're drinking alcohol, like, does it matter if you're drinking whiskey or if you're drinking a beer? I mean,
One of it was the liability of being able to pass off. In the parks, we have much less control over the space than we do indoors. Part of it was they should not be serving on the outdoor plaza or outside anyway. The requirements currently are to serve inside the mill. And we kind of keep an eye on that as much as we can. So
maybe I'm not clear. I
Okay.
didn't ask a good question. So they usually serve on this back wall here.
Mhm.
And so if a patron cannot go outside of the building, is that what I'm understanding? Or they cannot serve the alcohol outside the building?
They can't cross the threshold and go outside. And that's really all about how the alcohol license is applied for. When people rent only the inside of the mill, and that is the only thing they've applied for a permit for in the city, and they apply for their alcohol permit, they're not legally able to take it outside of the threshold of the door. Now, if a public event was to apply for an event permit in the park, which would be outside of this building, and they were to reserve the mill, they would be able to apply for beer and wine. In talking to the police department and looking at first steps to introduce hard liquor, we wanted to propose that it was only for indoor locations. Now, if the council wanted to discuss and approve for hard liquor to be allowed inside of parks and picnic shelters and to open it up for all, certainly would be your discretion.
So I guess I'm just curious, you said this kind of originated with a citizen request. And I'm just curious, I could think of types of alcohol, but what kind of events are we talking about where they want to serve that as opposed to just like beer and wine?
We've had an approach to do a festival of trees in November.
Sorry, you said Festival of Trees?
Trees, yes,
Okay.
as a fundraiser for the food bank. And they want to sell themed drinks, including hard alcohol in them.
Okay, thank you.
I guess for me, I just see the mill as a very attractive space. And it doesn't make sense to me that we mix the parks with, if we want hard alcohol, you know, that would be, I don't think we're going to be serving hard alcohol in community centers and, but I guess the seniors, I guess they want, seniors want, I guess I'd trying to picture my grandma pounding, you know, some,
They were saying bourbon and bingo when we were having our discussion, and it actually sounded quite nice.
all right, well, I guess I'm off base, so.
They think the word is sipping, not pounding.
Okay, is that what the term is? Okay.
So
And I think this is when our new Zip Transit might come in handy also for our
Exactly.
seniors.
Good partnerships, good partnerships.
I watched the Super Bowl parade and I watched what appeared to be pounding of beverages. So that's why I guess I use that term.
Very positive.
So with these changes, it doesn't change anything like having a the VIP session of Aquafest or those kinds of things outside the mill.
No, it wouldn't change any of our policies outside the mill for setting up the beer gardens, setting up the alcohol events.
Would that include being able to use other than wine and beer in those areas? Which is not allowed right now?
Technically, not unless you guys direct us that we want it in the outdoor spaces too.
Well,
Okay,
and as a reminder, this is on city property. So if a beer garden was to be held on private property, even though you still have to go through the permit process with the city, on private property, you're unrestricted on the type of alcohol. That's just your permit with the state. But with our proposal, if a beer and wine tent was to be set up at the park for a special event, anything above the 15% ABV would not be allowed.
okay. Thank you.
And what is our police department? What are their input if they had in this policy, since they would be enforcing inebriation and potential challenges associated with that?
I'm happy to speak on behalf of the conversation or pass
Go
it
ahead.
over to Chief.
You can go ahead first.
So in our conversation, we asked one of the very questions, does hard liquor make a difference for the police department when they are patrolling events and how alcohol is abused or increasing DUIs? And their response in our group meeting was that no, they don't see a specific relation to the two events. Anything you want to add?
No, yeah, we just haven't had any incidences with the alcohol or the beer and the wine that's been served here. But we can always, like we told them, we'd look at it. If it does increase, we'd come back and ask for changes. But right now, we have not seen any effects from that.
What about cleanup related stuff? I mean, has there been any issue with damage or, you know, excess waste due to, I mean, I don't know anything that would be specific to alcohol, but I know what kind of behavior goes on when people have too much alcohol. So
We haven't had any police call out issues for mill rentals in the 2.5 years I've been covering them. We do have a few damages. That is why we came back with an increased security deposit on both rentals and on the alcohol permitted rentals. But we have been pretty successful in the damage is going to happen from those events, whether there's alcohol there or not. It's either a renter that's going to be nice to our facility or it's a renter that doesn't care.
Would expanding the opportunity to have hard alcohol served in the same way beer and wine is served, would that be easier to manage or enforce? Like, is it going to cause an extra work to have one rule for this and one rule for that?
Right now, we do not need servers or bartenders for beer and wine for private rentals. This would make it a little bit more awkward. If they wanted hard spirits, they would need to have a bartender because we were worried about the public inebriation and being able to see that and cut people off when they needed to before we had incidences occur.
Thank you.
Is the insurance the same? The liability insurance when they rent the building, is it the same amount that's required whether alcohol is served or not?
Right now, we request a 2 million, 1 million policy, liquor liability policy for rental. We actually are looking with our risk management team at the WCIA best practices, which is to require, if there's a nonprofit or a company involved, a commercial liability policy of 2 million, 1 million. as well as liquor liability. So we're actually asking for a little more insurance just to bring it into state recommendations.
But you do not have to add the liquor liability, the liquor endorsement if you don't have alcohol in the building.
I would support this because I think as we saw with the numbers, I mean, I attend a fair amount of fundraisers and so forth, and there's always hard alcohol served at those fundraisers. And I think it limits the mill's ability to attract events. So I would support this change in policy.
And just to be clear, that's what you're looking for tonight is kind of guidance, just unofficial. So I guess we just want to go down the line.
I agree.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree also. I do have one more question about the liability insurance. We have a private citizen who wants to come in, do the mill, have a party, and they need to have this insurance. Do we point them to any place where they can get this insurance?
We do. We have a link to the WCIA provided Gather Guard, but we also say they can go through their own providers if they have them. So we give them several options.
Thank you.
And then I would also support, I guess the only thing I would note, and I'm sure you're going to do this anyway because it's you guys, it's just that with a new policy like this, if we kind of watch it, keep on top of it. And, you know, my main concern is outflow from the building after such an event. And so as long as we're on top of that and we make sure it's not an issue, then I support it as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. That brings us to item 2C, which is the 2025 Q1 code amendment status update with Russ.
Okay, good evening, Council. Russ Wright, Community Development Director for the City of Lake Stevens. I just have a brief report for you tonight. Tried to do quarterly reports to let you know what you know. Long-range hearing for the interim ordinance, and the full ordinance will be developed out throughout the year. The goal, one, is to maintain consistency with changes to state law, and we're also looking to streamline our code in a broader sense, just to make sure all of our decision-making tools are aligned and easy to use. The second thing we're working on is our streets and sidewalk code update and concurrency update. That's also in line with the engineering design standards work being done by Public Works. So we're working on those projects hand in hand to make sure that we have clear prescriptive standards in the code and create designs and a how-to guide in our eds. So that's a major project we're working on, and that will include a public outreach program. And then the next code we're taking up is our critical areas ordinance. That was something that council provided some budget for this year, and we will be working with a consultant to help with GIS, mapping, and other tasks as we move through that. So that's a brief overview of where we're at with code amendments, other long-range projects. We will have our docket hearing for 2025 in front of the council shortly. Very small docket this year, just looking at our capital facilities plan as we do every year. And the biggest change will be the Parks and Recreation element, with the Parks Department bringing forward a standalone plan and then integrating that with the current chapter. Other things to report out, just a couple of quick things on permits. Year to date, we've had 358 permits. Of those, 148 are building permits, 29 land use permits, and then the rest would be a variety of different types of permits. So like I said, just a brief report on what we've been doing the last couple of months, and any questions from the council.
Thank you. Any questions?
I don't have one on this. I do have a question. Where in our code, this is not I went by Frontier Heights area park and I saw maybe the most graffiti I've ever seen. I thought it was in Seattle or Everett, along fences, even along houses. Do we have anything in our code that requires individuals to address graffiti on private property?
We do in commercial properties, most definitely. And I would assume, I would have to look at that, but I would believe it would apply to residences and they have about 48 hours to comply. And we have a graffiti task force, if you will. So if you see that, I would say you could report it either through code enforcement or through the Public Works portal, if it's on public property.
Would it be Citizens View?
For
To
any
report.
graffiti on public property,
Yeah.
if it's on commercial, private properties, go through the code enforcement portal.
Did you, Councilmember Ewing, did you say it was on private property? or-
Yes.
So on fences and houses?
On fences and a house. I mean, Frontier Heights Park, you look out, there's a house that's got probably a 10-foot high. I mean, it's a whole section of OSB siding that's got something all along the side of it. Fences for probably 100 feet on either side, all the way down that road there. I mean, it's a significant amount. So that's what I was just there trying to show someone the area actually on Sunday, and saw something I hadn't seen in our city before. So anyway, just thought I'd ask.
I'm seeing an increase of it. There's definitely an increase in graffiti. Chief, do you see that too? You don't really see where there's been an increase? No?
Yeah, got that many reports up. Mayor sent me one out here on 16th Street that got hit this weekend. That's what we usually get from us, the mayor, when he sends them to me.
Well, anytime we've handled any graffiti on private property, we've always asked the property owner for permission. We did that on Lundin that one time. It took us a while to get to the person, but once we got the permission, we were able to paint the fence. But I don't know of any rules like you're stating, like the commercial.
It looks like it's all residential. So no questions. Russ, on that. Thanks for the presentation.
Okay, any other questions for us? Nope, going once, going twice. Okay. That moves us, thank you, Russ. That moves us to item 2D, the 116th, 117th Avenue Pedestrian Project Alternatives Analysis with Ben.
Hello, council. My name is Ben Romanaggi. I'm a senior civil engineer with the city of Lake Stevens. Also accompanying me here is Kim Klinkers, the city engineer, and then two consultants, Brett Jestinin and Maria Troublehorn. Improved pedestrian access is an important value for the city of Lake Stevens. This is a value held by the voters who passed the transportation benefit program in 2022 to help improve multimodal access across the city. The project here is one that was identified as one of those segments. And so here is kind of results of one of the studies and some of the next steps, and I'll let our consultants take it away.
Thanks, Ben. My name is Brett Justine, and I'm with Atwell, civil engineering consultant. So the project team here on your screen is two consultants, Atwell, and Maria here is with PH Consulting. And we are working with city staff, Kim Klinkers, Ben Romanaggi, and Aaron Halverson.
All right, so I'm Maria. I'm the traffic consultant on the project. And as Ben mentioned, something that the city's trying to do is to provide an enhanced multimodal network, get more people feeling comfortable walking around the city and get just more pedestrians out and about. So one of the other goals of this project was to leverage the funds that the city does have to the maximum benefit. So on the screen over there, you can see a map that shows the area that this project was focused on. We were focused mostly on 116th and 117th. And this is north of the lake, and the area has Lake Stevens High School, North Lake Middle School, and Highland Elementary School. So there are a lot of children that are walking in the area. We did observe a lot of children, particularly on 26th Street on the north side of the road, using the sidewalk to get to school. So PH Consulting undertook a traffic study, and we collected traffic data such as traffic volumes at 6 intersections that are shown with the white dots on the map there. We also collected traffic volumes on 116th and 117th, as well as speed data. And in the field, we observed traffic operations and collected sight distance data. So moving on to the next slide. We then continued to the next part of our study, which was actually evaluating all the data that we collected and looking at a few different options for improvements that we could make. So the recommendation that we came up with was the one-way couplet. And in this design, we felt that we would best meet the goal of the project, which was to enhance the multimodal network. And that was because we will be able to provide a kind of a separate pedestrian facility that is not mixing space with vehicles. So on the in the left image there, you can see kind of a map view of what the one-way couplet could look like. And the black area represents the asphalt where vehicles would travel, and the green area represents where the pedestrian area would be. So you can see there that there would be traffic on one side of the road and pedestrian area on the other side of the road on both 116th and 117th. And in the cross section, that's the right image, you can see that as if you were standing on 116th, looking north, there would be a vehicle lane coming towards you. And then on the right side of the road, there would be a pedestrian area. So moving on to the next slide. So the characteristics of this one-way couplet, just to get a little bit more specific, we recommend that we would have southbound traffic on 116th and northbound traffic on 117th. And we would put the pedestrian area on the east side of the roadway. So the reason that we came up with this specific configuration is that we found, based on the data, that there is actually more northbound traffic on 117th. In general, there's more traffic on 117th. So if we do the northbound traffic lane on 117th, there's going to be less rerouting, potentially less impacts to traffic circulation in the area. We also found, based on our site distance review, that the site distance for drivers is better for this direction of travel. So for example, if you want to travel northbound, if you're on 117th, you actually have better visibility trying to turn onto 26th than you would if you were traveling on 116th. And vice versa, if you're trying to travel southbound, you have more visibility turning onto 20th Street from 116th than 117th. So that would work a little bit better to have the one-way couplet in that direction from that perspective. And we also wanted to place the pedestrian path on the east side of the road because this results in fewer interactions between vehicles and pedestrians based on what we saw for where pedestrians seem to be traveling. And it also a little bit better matches where we did observe pedestrians to be traveling. So going to the next slide. So you can see here just a basic example of what an application could look like so that you guys can have a chance to visualize that. So in a very basic example or a temporary application, that could consist simply of some striping. So just paint on the roadway or plastic markings and glued on flexible delineators. So in this image, you can see that simpler application. In our situation, the roadway would be a little bit narrower and just one lane of traffic going one direction rather than 2 lanes of traffic. And going to the next slide, there are also various treatments that we could implement for a more permanent situation. So for the pedestrian, oh, it's okay. So for the pedestrian area, we would like to separate it from vehicle traffic. And, you know, one option, the simple option is to just use paint or plastic markings on the road. But if we want to provide a little bit more separation for pedestrians, we could use a rumble strip. And we could also provide a little bit more protection with an extruded curb, like the image on the right, or armadillos, like the image on the left. It just provides a little bit more protection for pedestrians. And another option would also be, from a visual perspective, to have a different color asphalt or a different material for the pedestrian area. One other aspect that could be a good idea to implement would be to have a physical barrier at the beginning of the pedestrian area so that when vehicles are entering the roadway, they don't get confused and try to enter the pedestrian area. And that can be as simple as those flexible delineators that were on the previous slide, or it can be more of a physical application like an extruded curb or bollards. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Brett.
Thanks, Maria. Okay, so the next couple of slides are going to illustrate the differences between our proposed one-way couplet and the alternative that we looked at. This picture here shows the one-way couplet. If you look closely, which you can't, there's a lot of existing features here that we're not changing. Most of the improvements for the one-way couplet would be surface level with a handful of new curb ramps, crosswalks. But I do want to point out that this would all be completed within existing right-of-way and having basically minimal conflicts with existing utilities and other improvements. Next slide. So this is an alternative design that we're showing here that's based on the city's standard for a shared path, a pedestrian path. This basically from the travel lane there to the right side of the screen is what's existing already. And so we would basically cut the pavement at the fog line, and then everything to the left of there is all new improvements that would require approximately 29 feet of right-of-way from the crown of the road. So the existing right-of-way that we have is 30 feet plus in some locations, but generally there's going to be a right-of-way issue there. So the bold line work on this exhibit shows the improvements. The curb and gutter in the middle of the screen would be there would be a pass-through for surface water runoff from the road. And then the path itself would drain to that swale and provide a water quality treatment to the project. But again, this would expand the right-of-way that's existing. Next slide. So in the alternative analysis here, looking at the one-way couplet and just wanted to point out some key drivers to how we ended up at the recommended one-way couplet. So the one-way couplet provides full pedestrian circulation along and between 117th and 116th Avenues with, again, minimal conflicts, uses existing pavement and right-of-way. The 117th Avenue alternative provides pedestrian access for only 117th. So the one-way couplet actually doubles pedestrian access in that neighborhood. There's also utility conflicts that will be in the way, including dry utilities, power, telecommunications, but also would require storm system modifications. And I mentioned right away earlier, there would be approximately 9,000 square feet that would need to be acquired. Other conflicts here, there's fencing, there's rockeries and landscaping that would be in conflict with our new improvements that we would need to install. And there's also a twin poplar tree that's a rather large tree at 66 inches diameter breast height that is on the south end of 117th. That would be an issue there too. Next slide. So looking at costs, we provided this breakdown. So for the 116th, 117th, utilizing existing pavement and existing right-of-way, you can imagine that the cost would be considerably less. So our estimate, we've estimated that to be about 450,000 for construction costs. The 117th Avenue alternative that that we showed an exhibit of earlier would cost approximately 400,000 in right-of-way acquisition, 1.8 million in construction for a total cost of 2.2 million. I did want to point out that that is just for 117th Avenue. So if you basically double that for, providing the same access for 116th, and you're looking at double what this difference is or savings of 1.75 million. This doesn't take other costs into consideration, but there would be additional costs for engineering, which is approximately 10% of the construction cost, environmental permitting, and right-of-way services would also be required. And also additional survey would be needed, considerably more. Next slide. So next steps, what we have planned here is we're on our way to implementing a pilot program that would be a temporary application of the one-way couplet on 116th and 117th. This month, March 2025, we're preparing for a public outreach phase and putting together materials for that for an open house. And we'll begin preparing and planning for the pilot program for that temporary installation. Next month in April, we will have that, or we are planning to have that open house meeting for public comment and finalizing the design for the pilot program. And then May, we are planning to implement that pilot program for a 4-week period before school is out, I believe, so that we can assess kind of how that will operate during school session. And then the next steps after that would be implementing the permanent one-way couplet, collecting that feedback from the public, finalizing our design, and construction would be targeted for fall 2025. Next slide. Questions?
So many questions. Oh, my God. Okay, so looking at your plan, you did a traffic study on 117th, 116th. What about 22nd and cross streets? What was the traffic? What's going to happen on that when you've got people on 117th that have to go north when they're coming out of their driveways, which is another question I have. They're going to have to go north. They're going to dump on 22nd if they're south of that. They're going to dump on 24th if they're just coming from there from 22nd to 24th. Did you do a traffic study on any of that? What's going out of there?
We did consider the expected level of rerouting, essentially. We didn't do an extremely detailed study, but we did consider the various locations that people probably are going to reroute to. And we did consider that people may end up needing to go north, turn left, come south, so that, there may be there certainly will be a change in traffic circulation. There will be more people turning left at some locations than others and going through at some locations than others.
Okay, so on your plan of the couplets, one-way couplets, I did not see anything for, so if you're going north on 117th, that means that the traffic is on the left side and pedestrian traffic's on the right side. What is the plan for entering the houses on that right side, on the east side, when they're just basically there's a driveway every 40 feet?
Yes, so we will have, if it ends up being a situation where we have like an extruded curb barrier or something, we will have breaks in that so that people can access their houses. We're not intending to take away access to homes.
Or you just get out and move the armadillos out of the way.
Well, I'm thinking we're gonna have a lot of dead armadillos. Yeah, I'm actually, I'm a little bit worried about the people, the pedestrians, bicycles and things like that, and people turning that way. I don't know. That's going to be, I think it's going to be a problem.
Well, that's another clarification I wanted to ask about. So we've been saying pedestrian, but at the beginning we were talking about multimodal. Is the intention for this to be foot traffic only, or are we going to be routing bikes through here too?
So it would be more of a pedestrian path. It's not something where I would recommend that the police go out and arrest bicycles that try to use it. But it would be more of a pedestrian path, and I would suggest possibly putting a Sharrow on the road. One other thing to note too is that with narrowing the road, I do expect that there would be a reduction in traffic speeds on this road. As of right now, we do have a speed limit of 25 miles per hour, and the mean speed is certainly higher than that. So we do have issues with people traveling faster than they should. I believe it's 6% of vehicles are traveling at 35 miles per hour or more.
You're in Lake Stevens? What?
And with narrowing the roadway, I do anticipate that we will have some lower speeds. With the pilot application, we will again be collecting more data, and we will be doing a comparison of the before and after to see, you know, what changes with the traffic volumes, what changes with speeds out there.
And under the proposed one-way couplet, it was probably in there, but a bunch of numbers went by really fast. How wide would the pedestrian or the multimodal path be in that one? I saw 11 feet, I thought at one point. Is that correct?
I believe it would vary in that exhibit that I put up on the screen. I pointed out to 8 to 10 feet.
8 to 10, okay.
We would ideally have 11 feet for that path that we could call it a shared path. But yeah, we're limited in some spaces to 21 feet of pavement width. And so, you know, depending on, you know, where the city is comfortable with on the travel lane and where we end up with our buffer width, buffer area width, that would determine the width of the pedestrian path.
Okay. And in analyzing foot traffic, did we determine there is a need to convert both of these streets to one way, or could a single one-way street handle all of the pedestrian traffic?
Yeah, so we don't have an issue of capacity as far as pedestrian traffic is concerned. It's more an issue of access, I would say. So we could certainly only do one road, but then the other road, any pedestrians living off of that road would then not have a path, would not have the continuation of and the connectivity up to the other road. One thing I do know is that the school district, as far as providing bus service, they do need an accessible route for students in order to not provide bus service to that area. And there are a few schools that are pretty close by that are within a 1 mile radius. So if there is an accessible route for students to walk on, they no longer have to take the bus a 1/4 mile to school.
And inaccessible is something without a marked walking path of some kind, correct?
Did you have something?
Well, I would, if you've been on 116th Avenue and walked it, there's not even a shoulder to walk on. So you're literally walking in the travel lane. Yeah.
So
Yes.
picture doing that at night, or early morning when there's school, you know, early in the wintertime. I mean, that's, it's not safe.
Well, and on that point too, I mean, we just went through sidewalks on 91st near a school. I personally can't really envision, you know, this in any form where there isn't some kind of physical barrier. Cause like I said, we just went through that, and I think it's pretty clear people want their kids, you know, somehow physically separated, walking to school to be safe.
Well, and even just walking down Grade Road. So I walk down Grade Road a lot. And where I'm walking on a sidewalk where there's a curb, I feel pretty safe. Where it goes from a sidewalk to a stripe, I literally have changed my walking path, the direction, because I walk the loop. There's a loop there. And I changed it so that when I'm on that stripe, I'm facing traffic because the speed limit's increased to 30 miles an hour, which means people are going 35 to 40 miles an hour on it. And they're coming straight at your back and there's nothing but a stripe on the road. And even though they can go up on a curb and up on a sidewalk, that's certainly something cars can and do. There is a sense of safety and a clear boundary. And when we talk about, the driveways and obviously giving families access to their homes, when you walk down any neighborhood that has a sidewalk, there's a dip for every driveway. That's something that's just part of adding a safer walkway to a neighborhood. I would not probably be in favor of a stripe on the road. I don't think stripes provide enough of a barrier, especially when it's on the way to schools, which these two roads, it's my understanding, are used for that quite a bit. I'm really in favor of this, like being creative around these two roads. I love the idea of more walkability, and I don't live in this neighborhood, so I can, say whatever I want about what I think is cool somewhere else. I think that, like with anything the city embarks on, I think it's going to be really important that we open lines of communication, that we have ways for folks that live in and around these neighborhoods to, especially, I love the idea of a pilot. For them to be able to say, wow, this is awesome, or wow, this is horrible, and why, and whether or not any of those issues can be mitigated. I just think communication and transparency is paramount when we are going to try something creative and new. And so want to just throw that out there. I would also agree with the safety and walkability issue. I'm not super in favor of a stripe. I love the armadillos just because they're kind of cute and can be painted fun colors, but some sort of physical barrier feels necessary along those roads. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
This is Kim Klinkers back here in the corner. I did want to just respond to that comment that in the staff report on the second page, there is a link here to the project website, which I have pulled up as well. So this is up and live for any community members to access for current project updates. And this does have Ben's contact information here as the city's project manager. There's a rough timeline here about what we've discussed this evening with some important dates. And then there is an option down here to stay informed for notifications as they're available. And we'll be utilizing that option as well, in addition to a public open house and other formats to spread the word. I think it might make sense too to try to engage with the high school, because there's a lot of drivers there, and that will have a direct impact if we're going to be implementing this in May. So we just wanted to share the preliminary traffic study with you and the idea, and have an opportunity if you had any questions or feedback as we kind of refine and plan for a pilot program.
Is there any chance, just because I know not everybody is plugged into the city website or social media, is there an opportunity to do some sort of just a lit drop and drop a postcard or a flyer along those roads to let people know that this is something that's coming, or an area where they have the opportunity to have input?
Yeah, that's part of the plan. So we're gonna talking with Ben, we're looking at doing some literature that has a QR code that goes to a website that he's created. Is that this one?
Yes.
Okay. That'll point them to this website to give them information, allow them to give feedback.
Great. That's
And then your open house is going to be advertised on the website, and we'll have those pamphlets out to the people before that, before the open house.
Yes, there will be some literature that goes out to the public just so they are aware of it. It does seem like the public is already aware of this project. Been checking Facebook, and so already receiving some feedback, and we'll make sure that during that open house that there'll be plenty of time for public comment. And then during the pilot phase, and then after the pilot phase, we will welcome additional feedback as well.
Great.
So one of the last questions I have on this maybe is that this is financed from the TBD.
Correct.
I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that initially though, the the initial financing was for sidewalks. Is that accurate? And that this would be a cost savings?
Correct. And so for the initial TBB proposal, the initial cost estimate was about $1.2 million. And since 2022, prices have increased, and as there's been kind of additional analysis at this location, prices have also increased as well. And
Yeah, and I can add too, I think that the resolution for the TBP, well, I think it was called the Transportation Benefit District at that point, cited sidewalks, trails, and walkway improvements, and 117th between 20th and 26th was specifically one of, like, I think it's number 4 on the top of the list. So we're just trying to come up with creative ways to deliver the intent of the project. And we thought it would,
So I remember 117th being on the list. I don't remember 116th being on the list.
no, you're correct. 116th was not on the list.
so you guys are getting extra with this project.
It's a two.
Yeah, for an extra $1.2 million. Yeah, I get it. So I don't,
No.
oh, it's both of them? are
Both of them for
1.2?
450, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So
Oh,
that-
that's okay.
I will-
So what I'm kind of interested
with the
in,
one way. It's a
kind of
bargain.
interested in the other thing where they had the stormwater swell. That would be more money because it
Correct.
really
Yeah.
cutting.
We wanted to present what the concept was that we implemented on 91st Avenue with the widening and the swale and the multi-use path, and provide a cost comparison about what that approach would look like on only 117th versus if we utilize the existing pavement width and only had one travel lane and then one lane for non-motorized. And then we thought it would be have a maximum cost benefit return to think about it as a couplet with 116th involved as well. And then to answer your question further, in the staff report, I did include information about the budget, and there's $300,000 budgeted from the TBP fund for this phase of the project. But in addition to that, we have a pavement preservation budget, which is partially funded by the TBP in addition from streets, and the paving and the curb ramp improvements along, we're planning for 117th, and then only half of 116th needs to be repaved. That work would be funded from the pavement preservation budget.
So I guess my question really is if we go with the swale in the middle, it costs more money, I get that, but does that really improve our water quality that makes it worth it? I mean, we're talking two different things here, right? We're talking pedestrian safety, et cetera. But there's also an opportunity for helping the quality of the water in the lake. So I'm kind of wondering, is that actually worth it? I mean, does that pencil out to do?
Is there a problem now with drainage? on
I
the
don't know.
street?
I don't think there's a lot of existing storm drainage infrastructure along the corridor. And so I think it all sheet flows to the vegetated shoulder and infiltrates, and it's probably treated through the natural vegetation that's there. We know, all the water eventually flows down to the lake. But I could ask our stormwater team to come back and comment on that if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd like to know I'd like to know that. I mean, is it worth it to go that direction? And is it going to help us any? I mean, it just seems to me like we're getting more bang for the buck if we do that, even though it's more expensive. I mean, we have to deal with stormwater all the time here, and we've been talking about coming up with different ways of dealing with stormwater, and swales have certainly been in the conversation. So is this an opportunity for us to hit two things at one time?
I'm gonna get way out of my skis here, but along those same lines, you mentioned only part of 116th needs to be repaved.
Correct.
How close is the rest of it to needing that? Because if we're already gonna get everybody out there and do paving, is there any cost savings to be had by just doing the whole thing?
So the east half of 116th was paved by the water district when they replaced a line. That was back in 2019, I believe. So the pavement's still relatively new and in good condition. The rest of 116th and 117th is quite a bit older and does need an overlay.
And so that's something we'd look at doing regardless of pedestrian traffic stuff, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm glad you folks were up here experiencing our high school traffic issues and got to observe all that. So my question would be, and there's been quite a bit of chatter, I guess, on social media. we're essentially taking a lane of traffic away from exiting or entering the high school. So how do you compensate for that? Because now we're forcing on the outbound route, 2 lanes of traffic of high schoolers into 1 lane. And the backups that are already caused are going to be magnified. How do we address that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when we were in the field, we were there in the afternoon. So we were able to observe the PM school peak. And what we saw coming from the high school was a lot of traffic turning from 26th right onto 116th. And that backup did go pretty far. We definitely saw that. When I looked at the traffic data that we actually collected it for 12 hours. So we got a good chunk of data. And what I saw was that under existing conditions, an all-way stop control actually isn't warranted from a traffic perspective. So what we have out there, it was probably put in maybe for a sight distance or a safety issue or something else, which is totally valid. But from a traffic perspective, I don't anticipate that we are actually going to be causing any of the intersections to operate poorly. You are correct that we are going to be forcing everybody kind of onto one street. That's true. What we did see though is for the school peak, it really is everybody's turning right onto 116th. I didn't see a whole lot of traffic turning right onto 117th. So we would essentially also be bringing traffic that's trying to turn onto 117th over to 116th. The way that intersection is going to be operating though is basically as a 3-way stop control intersection rather than a 4-way stop control intersection. And I actually think that it's not going to be operating any more poorly than it currently is.
You say that'd be operating as a 3-way intersection?
Yes. With the improvements, with the southbound only travel, we would no longer have a northbound approaching traffic at 116th at 26th. So it would essentially be westbound, eastbound, and southbound at that location. Did I just confuse everybody? I think so.
I would point out though that that's the reason for the pilot program is to kind of see how it works. Get some data and get feedback and, assess from there.
Yeah, thanks, Brett.
So I guess I echo, I like the barrier, the physical barrier. I like the fact that we are able to significantly reduce the costs and get twice as much for that. I like the fact that there was improved safety for people traveling there. And I think 20-mile-an-hour speed limit really means 30. So if we set the speed limit at 20, that will also impact that. And I don't know if we can use our camera system in that area. I don't remember what the guidelines are for the speed cameras near schools and parks and such. But that might also be something to consider. You're shaking your head now.
I don't think you can do it on that corridor. It's too far outside the high school.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I don't think so. When we looked at it last year, the way the legislature wrote it, I think that's going to be negated.
So, and what I think the thing that I like the most is this idea came from a citizen that lives along there. They had a problem, they brought a solution, the city looked at it, and here we are. And, the advanced stages of a consideration, we have an option to do a pilot program to work out whatever bugs are there. And so I love the way the city is maximizing return on, limited resources that we have. So anything we can do to improve walkability and safety of, our kids and the adults that are there is a great plus.
How long is the pilot?
4 weeks.
Yes, from May to June. So we'll get the school traffic as well. And so we'll see those conditions.
So that'll even include our youngest of drivers at the high school. Get their license the end of the school year.
It will.
So,
Yes, and just so you know too, for the pilot application, we will be putting out all the signage that we think is appropriate. We won't be cutting corners on signage just because it is a temporary application.
Any other questions?
I do have one more.
Go.
So at the intersection of 116th, how feasible would it be to put in a roundabout there? Is that something-
Yeah, I was gonna ask that, too, but I decided not to. So the question I do have though is the pilot project is only 4 weeks. What's it costing to actually stripe this for just that 4 weeks?
That is a good question. We haven't done a cost analysis for that yet. Actually, so more about it.
Yeah, I need to check into it.
Yeah, it would, I know it would be a fraction of the cost of the permanent installation, but yeah, we haven't figured out what those costs are. It would be mostly striping for the temporary pilot.
We have that in the budget for 2025 already, Kim?
Correct. Yeah, we have $300,000 currently budgeted for this project along 117th.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Nope. Everyone's got them all answered. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the information. Okay. And with that, before I adjourn the meeting, I'm just going to throw it to Kelly really quick.
Real
info.
quick.
Go for it.
Okay, council retreat coming up, Thursday, April 24th. I think Caitlin's put a hold on your calendars. Snohomish Carnegie Building off Cedar Avenue will have it catered. More to come on times, probably 9 to 4:30, 8:30 to 4:30. It'll be all day. Here's our preliminary agenda items at this point, and I want to get some feedback or think about it, and I'll email this out to you guys as well. I'm going to read it. But if you have other additions, let us know. 5-year strategic plan for the city. I'm going to talk about city values, update on the new city hall building, court update, Chapel Hill property update, traffic cameras, and these are not in order of how they're going to be discussed. May talk a little bit about the upcoming sewer district trial or the lawsuit trial. Barb may do a 2024 year-end budget, kind of year-end projections, and also Sarah discussing taking over the county parks. So those.
And you're going to
we
fit
could
all
probably
that
fill
in
up most of the day.
8
but-
hours?
What was that?
You're going to fit that in one day?
That's the plan. That's the hope. But that's kind of what we've sketched out so far. So any thoughts or ideas, let me know. I will again email this out.
I have one thought to talk amongst yourselves about, an update about the Everett Waterline Agreement.
Okay.
And I would make that the number one discussion topic. And this is why. If we don't get that resolved by the end of this year, with a potential for a new leadership at the city of Everett, we are going to be set back again further than what we are now. And so we've talked about this extensively. We had some movement with the current leadership, and we need to make sure that that happens. That is the single biggest piece of economic viability we have in our city. And if we fail to do that, we are doing a disservice to our citizens. So Cassie Franklin, the mayor of Everett, has been working with us. She's up for reelection. And if she is not reelected, the likelihood of us having a new mayor have that be a top priority for them is just not likely.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'll make sure we note that.
Thank you, Andy, for bringing that up.
Yep.
So I'm not going to be there. So I would like for there to be some access or information or availability of something to weigh in on things. But I won't be able to be available.
So I've spoken very briefly with Caitlin and Jean about that, and we are working on a way to, at the very least, let you know what's going to be discussed, give you a chance for feedback, and then hopefully we'll sort out an IT solution with at least audio or something like that. But that is in the works. So.
Yeah, Councilmember Ewing, I'm sorry that we couldn't make that work for you.
You only get your 25th anniversary once, so.
That is much more important. And that's it for me.
All right. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you.